I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Ben Maguire.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The issue of sewage dumping in our waterways was one of the biggest concerns of residents across my North Cornwall constituency during the general election. And judging by the number of members here today, I certainly was not alone with that. In the course of my speech, I'd like to firstly take the opportunity to highlight the scale of the problem of sewage dumping and its effects on our communities. Secondly, set out what infrastructure improvements are so badly needed to tackle this scandal. Thirdly, I'll try to outline some of the regulatory reforms which I think are required. And finally, I'll outline what South West Water must now do to finally end the scandal of constant sewage dumping in our beaches and rivers. North Cornwall is a very rural constituency, and we have several rivers, including the Camel, the Inny and the Allen. And North Cornwall is also blessed with some of the most beautiful beaches in the world, from Harlyn, Summerlees, Widmouth Bay, Damer Bay, Poles F, Crackington and many more. I was extremely fortunate to grow up in Cornwall, where I learnt to swim and surf at these incredibly beautiful spots. North Cornwall's families and residents, young and old, thoroughly enjoy the waves at Morgan Porth, the fishing villages of Padstow, Port Isaac, and the breathtaking cliffs at Tintagel. They also enjoy the impressive sea pools in Bude and Boscastle. The 2023 figures from the Environment Agency showed the total duration of sewage overflows discharged into local rivers and waterways in the South West region was 530,737 hours, representing an 83% increase compared to 22.
Would he give way?
I will give way.
Thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. In 2020, Natural England notified Somerset councils that the phosphate levels in the Somerset Levels and Moors Ramsar sites were too high, and thousands of homes are still caught in a moratorium. And alongside this, last year there were 3,336 sewage spills in Glastonbury and Somerton, making it the most polluted constituency in the country. So does my honourable friend agree that water companies should be investing in more sewage treatment plants and that the government should introduce a sewage tax on water companies' profits?
Thank you for that intervention, and I absolutely agree on both of those points, and I'll address them in slightly more detail in a moment, if I may. In 2023 alone, many of the blue flag beaches in North Cornwall experienced over 2,700 hours of sewage discharges across 148 separate incidents. This pollution, as my honourable friend just mentioned, is often linked to combined sewer overflows, which are activated during heavy rainfall to prevent urban flooding, severely compromising water quality and endangering swimmers and marine life. I will give way.
I'm grateful to the honourable member, and I congratulate him on securing this debate. He talks about storm overflows, and the data that is recorded from storm overflows by South West Water is sometimes different to that which appears on the Water UK app. So does he agree with me that we need just one single reliable source for sewage outflow data?
Thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and I do agree with him that we need one reliable source of data, and I'll come on to address that as well slightly later in my speech.
What will the honourable gentleman give way?
I will briefly give way.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I commend the honourable member for North Cornwall for bringing this forward? I spoke to him beforehand. One of the issues that you referred to, he comes from his mum and dad live in a farm building, and the problems are very clear what the issues are there. Does he have the same problems as my constituents have when it comes to single houses with septic tanks for the removal of the sludge? That they have a proviso that they can only do it once a year, and for disabled people and big families, it's important to have it for 2 times a year. Has he experienced that issue in his own constituency?
I thank the honourable member for that intervention, and of course growing up in a very rural area such as North Cornwall, that's an issue that's faced by many of my constituents. I thank you for raising that. Just looking behind the shocking statistics for a moment to properly understand the real impact this is having on coastal communities like mine, I would refer, Madam Deputy Speaker, to 3-year-old Finlay from Widmouth Bay. This time last year, Finlay's mum took her son to Widmouth Bay to play on the North Cornish beach. Later that day, Finlay became extremely unwell, and a friend's child who had been on the same beach at the same time had similar symptoms of diarrhoea and vomiting which lasted for weeks. I'm afraid to say that just last week there were 3 sewage dumps in Widmouth Bay. Tragically, in just the few months since my election, I've lost count of the number of constituents who have written to me or stopped me in the street to explain how they've stopped swimming or stopped surfing in our oceans from fear of getting sick from the contaminated water. I will give way.
Thank you. Cornwall is covered with sewage alerts. Proceedings have been taken against South West Water. The new water review will be vitally important to reform regulation and infrastructure. Would the honourable member agree with that?
I will come on to address the water review in a moment, and I am pleased to see that the government are finally looking at this issue in detail and, crucially, as the honourable member says, consulting, which I think is so important. I've lost count, as I was saying, of the constituents who have told me they've stopped swimming or surfing in our oceans from fear of getting sick from the contaminated water. Imagine the immense effect this is having on our tourist industry in Cornwall and the South West, which has been the envy of the country. Not only are these sewage spills wrecking our health, they're wrecking our vital local businesses. Surfers Against Sewage have reported large increases in reports of people getting ill as well after entering the water. In the year to September 22, there were 720 reports, double from the previous year, and by September 23, this rocketed to 1,924. It was with a certain amount of trepidation that I went surfing at Summerlees Beach in Bude just days before the election, not just because my right honourable friend, the member for Kingston and Surbiton, was standing next to me in a wetsuit, and I wondered what stunt awaited me, but because there were visible signs of a sewage dump from earlier that day. It's not just our beaches which bear the brunt of sewage dumping, but also our rivers as well. Just today, Natural England confirmed the River Camel remains in an unfavourable condition, and Cornwall's Wildlife Trust cautioned me just this afternoon that our ecosystems and species are in grave danger if we don't urgently put a stop to this.
I
will give way.
I thank my honourable friend. My constituency is a little further north, but still in the southwest, and I recently spent an afternoon with some environmental campaigners in Tewkesbury, testing and recording samples from the River Avon for nitrate and phosphate pollution. The pollution was found to be very high in the former and high in the latter, consistent with their findings since June 2023. Will the honourable friend agree with me that it's time to put environmental experts on water company boards to hold them to account and ensure that environmental concerns take precedence in the boardroom?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and I absolutely do agree with him, and I'm starting to wonder if honourable members have seen my speech in advance, because I'm coming on to that. So how do we end this scandal? Well, despite the results of the parent company of South West Water, the Pennon Group, for 23-24, showing the group's revenue had increased 10% to £908 million, largely thanks to higher customer bills, very little of this was spent on the much-needed infrastructure upgrades. To add insult to injury, I will in a moment, to add insult to injury, the company have recently announced South West Water bills will rise by a staggering 22% by the year 2030. In fact, a copy of Pennon Group's 5-year business plan seemingly describes the state of our waterways in a parallel universe. Page 27 makes reference to, under the heading Bathing Water Quality, states its 5-year plan to 2030, we will deliver improvements at bathing and shellfish waters across the region to maintain our 100% bathing water performance. A quick glance at the company's own WaterFit sewage app shows there to be sewage dumping at multiple beaches across Cornwall and the South West region today, and quite likely as I speak right now. I'll give way to my honourable.
I thank the honourable member for giving way and for securing this debate, which I think is really important, so that the House knows. Obviously, I represent Poole in Dorset. This is in the South West, and sewage is a massive issue right across the South West, and Dorset as well in particular. It's a constant source of frustration from constituents, but one of the issues that come up time and again are the excessive profits that the private companies are making. Would the member agree that it's time these companies were brought back into public ownership?
Hear, hear.
I thank the honourable member for that intervention, and I'm just about to lay out some of my suggestions for water company reform, so I don't want to act as a spoiler for those. It's well known that one of the biggest reasons for sewage dumping is because there's not enough capacity in our storm overflow tanks to hold rainwater. In order to make sufficient capacity, these tanks are routinely emptied and raw sewage pumped into our waterways. Soon after my election, I was faced with reports of brown water coming out of residents' taps in St Eville, and in some cases, no water at all. It turned out the reservoir tank at the nearby Bearsdown Reservoir had serious cracks in it, and water tankers were deployed to serve the area. The capacity of the tankers was nowhere near sufficient, and a measly compensation of £50 per household was issued after weeks of severe disruption. Similarly, in Week St Mary, residents complained to me about problems with their water pressure, which has persisted for years. In some cases, the sudden drop in pressure has caused scalding from the resulting hot water. It's quite clear these issues have arisen after decades of underinvestment in our water and wastewater infrastructure. You may, Madam Deputy Speaker, reasonably ask, where has the water regulator Ofwat been while all of this has been going on?
Yeah.
Well, seemingly missing in action, which brings me on to the urgent need for a regulation revolution in our water industry. As part of the Water Special Measures Bill, I welcome the government's plan to prohibit performance-related pay for senior officials in a year when a water company fails to meet its environmental, consumer or financial standards, and I eagerly await how these standards will be more tightly defined. I'm afraid I'm more sceptical, however, about the proposal to require each water company to publish an annual plan detailing how they'll reduce pollution incidents. Many water companies already do this, and my constituents want to know how these companies and their glossy brochures and ambitious targets will be held to account on them. I'm afraid to say there was a palpable sense of relief among senior executives at South West Water when I met them soon after the details of this bill were published. In terms of enforcement measures, if the water companies fail to meet improvement targets, then Ofwat will be given power to issue fines. It's questionable whether fines will incentivise these firms who are making hundreds of millions of pounds, and again I look forward to seeing what level these penalties will be set at following the consultation. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and he's making an excellent case. And certainly in my own constituency, further west than his own, West Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, there have been 18 discharges around the coast and addressed in the last 10 days. In relation to the proposed changes within the current government consultation, attractive as it would be, and I strongly support the concept of bringing water back into public ownership, but of course the consequences of doing that and the costs make that a rather challenging thing to do. Would my honourable friend agree that when the Conservatives set these companies up as risk-free money-making emporiums, that actually what we need to do now is to bring in regulations so that the governance of these companies can be managed in such a manner that they are there to serve the public interest?
Yeah.
My honourable friend makes a very good point, and I will now just outline some of the measures I would put to the government minister. I'd urge the government to go much further by scrapping Ofwat, which has proven itself to be toothless and missing in action. The Liberal Democrats would replace Ofwat with a much more powerful Clean Water Authority that could ban bonuses for water company bosses who fail to stop sewage dumping, revoke licences of poorly performing water companies immediately, force water firms to publish the full volume and scale of their sewage dumping, mandate local environmental experts to sit on water company boards, and set legally binding targets on sewage discharges.
Would the honourable member give way?
I will give way.
I thank the honourable member for giving way and for bringing this debate. Following up on the honourable member's questions about public ownership, I wanted to ask the honourable member if he thinks that perhaps the Independent Commission on the Water Sector Regulatory System would be better off if it were tasked with at least considering how public ownership of water companies might work, rather than the current situation where this supposedly independent commission has been banned from considering one of the possible solutions to the problem.
I thank the honourable member for that intervention, and I think she raises a very important point about independence, and as was covered briefly earlier, the consultation will be a very important part of this. We've recently seen Lib Dem amendments in the other place to empower the regulator to revoke water company licences in the face of repeated failures, and crucially to make it a criminal offence for water companies to fail to implement pollution reduction plans and hold senior managers personally and criminally liable. In the last Parliament, my Liberal Democrat colleagues in this place also tabled an amendment to the Victims and Prisoners Bill to create a sewage illness victim compensation scheme. Under this scheme, where medical evidence is provided to support a claim, proper compensation would be payable by water companies to their victims, such as 3-year-old Finlay and his family. Can I take this opportunity to plead with the Minister on behalf of all my constituents to seriously consider these measures so that water companies are finally held accountable? No more excuses and no more delays. Picking up on a point made by an honourable member earlier, EDMs, not electronic dance music or LED motions, but event duration monitors, are fitted to storm overflow tanks, and they only measure the number and duration of spills, but not the volume. There have also been reports of faults with the EDMs, which could represent a serious underreporting of sewage spills, significantly skewing the data. This could mean the situation is far worse than we thought. Whatever enforcement approach is taken by the government against water companies, the accuracy of the data will be crucial, and so I ask the Minister to please consider the accuracy of the current monitoring system. When I took my seat in this place, I promised my constituents I would always speak truth to power. In a previous career before entering this place, I advised businesses and their leaders. If I could offer some advice here and now to the Chief Executive of South West Water, I would say please do the decent thing and go now. In what other universe could a Chief Executive preside over such a record of abject failure? Having been the Chief Financial Officer since 2015 and then the Chief Executive since 2020, almost 10 years of failed leadership has brought us to this diabolical situation. How on earth can anyone now have confidence that South West Water will miraculously turn things around in the next 5 years? Miss Davies declined to take a bonus last year and instead added that bonus amount to her base salary, which at last count was a whopping £860,000. And before you start worrying about South West Water's shareholders, they too were awarded a generous dividend of 44 pence per share. This is all while water bills are rocketing, children are getting severely sick as a result of this greed, and people everywhere are now too afraid to enjoy the beaches and rivers, which make Cornwall and the wider South West so uniquely special. As a society, at what point do we come together and say that this has to stop, for the sake of our children and for the sake of us all? Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I humbly suggest that that point has now long passed. Thank you.
Minister Emma Hardy.
Thank you very much, and I thank the honourable member for North Cornwall for this important debate, and to everybody who has intervened as well. And can I also say, express my sort of support and sympathy for Finlay. It's awful hearing about children becoming ill when they're just enjoying things that we enjoyed so well as children, and I'm really genuinely sorry to hear about that. And just to say, as I've said before, the amount of sewage in our waterways is unacceptable, clearly unacceptable. And for too long, the levels of pollution in our rivers, lakes and seas has been left unchecked. And southwest of England, with its 860 miles of coastland, is blessed with some of the most stunning waterways in the country, and it is of course vital that we protect these natural assets. South West Water's environment performance is clearly not good enough. They continue to be rated as requiring improvement through the Environment Agency's Environmental Performance Assessment, and they have the highest rate of incidence of the network in the sector. And so far, as the Honourable Gentleman has said, there have been 20 pollution incidents in his constituency, and they are clearly unacceptable. Where companies have failed in their statutory duties to maintain their assets properly and protect their local environment, regulators will take appropriate enforcement in action. The Environment Agency have informed me there are 24 charges against South West Water currently awaiting court hearing, and many of them relating to discharges in North Cornwall. Of course, it's inappropriate for me to comment further on these while the proceedings, though, are ongoing. However, I am reassured that the new powers in the Water Special Measures Bill, including relating to monitoring of emergency overflows — I did quite enjoy the idea that we could call EDM something else. What was it? Electronic dance music instead. Maybe that's what I'll be thinking of in the future. Will assist the Environment Agency with the workload and efficiency relating to these types of offences. And 2 new dedicated inspection teams have been in place since October this year. Once officers are trained, the annual number of inspections in the region will double from the 335 they will carry out this year. So I think that's a positive action being taken by the Environment Agency. And looking forward, South West Water is taking action to deliver necessary improvements. And subject, of course, to Ofwat's final determinations, they're planning around £750 million over the next 5 years to reduce sewage spills by 58% from current levels. They're also aiming to cut pollution incidents by 30% and are investing £140 million to reduce nutrient pollutions in the rivers. Now, this investment will mean cleaner rivers, seas and lakes across the country. Keeping an eye on the time this time, Madam Deputy Speaker. So in some of the storm flow guidance, in support of the forward investment to reduce pollution incidents, on the 21st of November, the Government launched a consultation on updated information and guidance for the management and regulation of storm overflow infrastructure in England. The document will then be published shortly after to ensure water companies have a clear forward framework to guide investment in storm overflow improvements. And the Government has also intervened to increase transparency regarding pollution incidents to enable the public and the regulators to better hold water companies to account. We've included a duty within the Water Special Measures Bill which will require all water and sewage undertakers to produce annual pollution incident reduction plans along with an accompanying implementation report. And the Chief Executives will be personally responsible for approving both the pollution incident reduction plans and the accompanying document. And in relation to the national storm overflows, the Government has also legislated to require water companies to publish all discharge data from storm overflows in real time. And I note one of your colleagues mentioned about having that one reliable source of data, which is incredibly important. And Water UK have just launched its National Storm Overflow Hub last Friday. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it, please have a look. You can see sort of, in terms of transparency, it's very, very good. In terms of making you angry about pollution incidents, maybe not so much. But you can see sort of where they're discharging all around the country, how long they've been discharging for, whether or not they're online or offline. So in terms of transparency, it's a huge step forward. Who was first? Go on, Erin.
Thank you. Although I'm not from the southwest I have the beautiful River Wharfe flowing through my constituency of Shipley, transparency from top of the poops is what we've been relying on up till now, shows that there's been over 2,450 overflows of sewage pollution last year. So I just wondered if the Minister would agree with me that these problems are national issues and that we really need to make sure that we are tackling this not only with South West Water but the likes of Yorkshire Water to make sure that these sewage outflows stop in future.
I thank my honourable friend. I agree with her entirely and I commend her for coming and raising this point, so I completely support her.
I'm grateful to the Minister, and I am aware of the new storm overflow hub that she talks about. The point I was trying to make is that sometimes with this new hub, the data that it reveals is different to that which the water companies are revealing on their apps, such as the South West Water WaterFit app. And this was discovered by a constituent of mine in relation to Sidmouth last weekend.
I thank the honourable gentleman. I'm more than happy to sort of have a look into any anomalies. If they want to sort of send details through of where there seems to be a discrepancy between the data, I can definitely pick that up. And in terms of bathing water, South West Water has 156 bathing waters, though I'm hoping that the honourable gentleman is going to be quite pleased, not only with our bathing water announcements in terms of removing strict automatic de-designation, removing the fixed dates, but also that we're redefining the term bathing to include, perhaps, Madam Deputy, people who go surfing as well, because I've heard that you're interested in surfing. And this will enable more people to enjoy the water environment, because at the moment the term bather, of course, just refers to people who swim, but we know so many more people enjoy our beautiful water. And on the 12th of November, DEFRA, jointly with the Welsh Government, announced its consultation on a package of potential reforms to the bathing water regulations. And these changes will modernise the system to meet the needs of the public. Now, this government have been clear there is no excuse for poor performance, and we will not look the other way while companies routinely fail to meet agreed standards. Water companies must take seriously their role in meeting public expectations and regulatory requirements, holding them to account when they fail. And just to sort of recap our three-stage approach to fixing the water industry, in the first week of the new Labour government, the Secretary of State and I met with water companies to secure agreement to amend their Articles of Association. Funding for vital infrastructure investment is ring-fenced, so that money cannot go, and we've seen evidence of this just last week, that money cannot go on bonuses, that money is for infrastructure improvement. New customers onto panels of water companies as well, looking at changing the culture and giving customers a voice, strengthening protection and compensation for households. But the most significant increase in enforcement powers for regulators in a decade has come from our Water Special Measures Bill, which I can announce will be arriving to the House before Christmas on second reading, so I'm sure I'll see many faces in that debate as well. And those powers include providing Ofwat with powers to ban bonuses, enabling regulators to issue automatic and severe fines for wrongdoing, and as well there's a duty on Ofwat to fulfil its environmental duties and legal requirements, strengthening cost recovery powers to ensure water companies bear the cost of enforcement activities. Now, the independent commission, which has been mentioned a few times, and this is needed to reform the whole of the water system, because this system, as we know, has developed incrementally since privatisation. I don't think anybody here thinks that this is a system that you would wish to design in the way that it's evolved. The call for public evidence is going to come in January, and I do urge, as I have before, every member from across the House to get involved in that call for evidence, find some evidence and put... I will, super quick.
Thank you. I thank the Minister for giving way, and I thank my honourable friend from North Cornwall for raising this important debate. Many of the points that have been raised this evening are ones that we've all experienced, but I think one of the issues that I've really found over recent months is that South West Water's communication and engagement with their customers has been atrocious. So what more can the government do to ensure that South West Water are properly engaging with their customers?
I thank the honourable gentleman, and I apologise having to rearrange our meeting yesterday as I was visiting a flooded event, and we will get that back in the diary quickly. And you're quite right to raise this. This is one of the reasons we want to put customer representation onto the water boards, to give that stronger voice for customers. But I'm more than happy to follow this up with him and see what more I can do to support him, because it's incredibly important that customers are treated with the respect that they deserve. And if water companies are not doing that, then I'm more than happy to follow it up. I've got 2 minutes, so I'm just going to quickly finish, if you don't mind. So the Commission is going to be led by Sir John Conliffe, supported by expert advisers, which we'll be announcing shortly, be wide-ranging and report to Government in the second quarter of 2025. The recommendations intended to inform future legislation to deliver long-term reform to clean up pollution and return the sector to stability across England and Wales, including, of course, the South West. So I'm grateful for all the contributions in today's debate. This is a really important issue. I want to reiterate the Government's commitment to driving meaningful long-term improvement in performance and culture of the water industry. We're committed to improving the health of our rivers, lakes and seas across England and the South West, and I look forward to working with all honourable members who are interested in fulfilling this ambition with us.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Order, order.